Got the live stream set up right now. I think it comes up as unlisted, and I think that I tried to do it once and it was unlisted, so you probably didn't. Probably nobody saw it, but it's turning into a pretty bad gardening year here in Ohio. It really is. It has just been cold and rainy, and then it'll get warm. It'll be 96 degrees, and then it'll be 40 degrees and raining and drizzling, and it thinks it's like March again. And it's just crazy. I'm just out there looking at my plants, and none of them, except for the potatoes. The potatoes are exceptionally happy, but everything else is just not where it should be. The radishes are looking like they're doing okay with it, but the tomatoes are by half the size they'd normally be by now. The uh, the peppers not growing very much. The lettuce, it's just the lettuce isn't even coming up. I don't know why not. The corn, it's just little tiny things that half of them didn't germinate. And the beans, I tried a second planting of beans, they didn't germinate. Um, so um, there's just nothing growing in the garden this year. I'll tell you, it's kind of crazy how normally this time of year we have really good warm days, in the 70s and 80s, and then we have like a thunderstorm every night or every other night, and then we have clear weather again and sun, and there just hasn't been any sun, really. I mean, there's been some sunny days. We had a sunny a sunny week, but then it'll just go to 40 degrees and be cold for days and days. And I mean, it's 40 overnight, but it gets up like 60 during the day. But that's just not enough for warm weather plants. I mean, I've got my squash plants and my cucumbers grown in the basement. They're ready to go out, but I can't put them out in this kind of weather. I mean, like I'm sitting here getting ready to turn the heater on in the shed. And it shouldn't be that way. I should have the fan on and be hot. But I guess that's just how it goes. Um, that's one of the things you have to remember about gardening is there's some things you can control. You can control the nutrition that your plants get. You can control the spacing that you put your plants at. You can control how you get them to climb the string, or you can control all types of things about the gardening experience, but uh, you can't control the weather. You can't control the sun, how much sun, the temperature, how much rain, and that's what we're facing now. It's just too much rain. It's just washing the seeds out so that they're not germinating and drowning the seeds. It's just been a nightmare. I think what I'm probably gonna have to do is try planting the beans inside and try to transplant them. I mean, that's about all I can do if I can't get them to germinate. Um, but my plants down in the basement are looking super happy and healthy. Um, under the grow lights and on the warming mat, they're all nice and happy down there. But they're getting pretty big. They're getting pretty big. They're gonna have to go out pretty soon. Um, I guess that's why it's important to have different crops too. The radishes are doing good and the potatoes are doing great. It's different years. Last year was kind of a crappy year for potatoes. Um, so yeah, so I do use burlap to cover the seeds while they germinate, and that generally works pretty well. It helps to distribute the water out. It helps to keep the seeds from rolling, because a rolling seed, if it rolls over, a lot of times it won't germinate. Um, and I have a big roll of burlap, and I use burlap, and then as soon as they germinate, I take the burlap off. The problem I'm having is I plant a row of beans, I cover it with burlap. Once the first one germinates and breaks the soil, you've got to pull the burlap off, because you have to assume the other ones aren't far behind, and you don't want them to grow into the burlap and get all tangled up in it, and then you can't get it off of them. And they need light as soon as they germinate. The problem I'm having is one or two germinate, I pull the burlap off, and the rest of them just they don't come up, right? And I tried replanting the seeds, and then we had so much rain that it washed all the dirt off the seeds, and they floated up to the top. It's just like, it's just been one of those years. So hopefully things will stabilize here in a week or two, and I'll be able to replant, and I'll still have plenty of time to grow some beans. But it's just frustrating when you do all that work, and you do all that work again, and you still just don't have any results. I got like 5 bean plants, and the bean plants are this tall, and they're 3 weeks old, you know, you know, they should be climbing by now. Um, but yeah, burlap is a really good thing. It also helps keep the birds from going and digging out the seeds when you plant them. And I grow in some pretty heavy clay soil, and I've never had too many problems with that. So normally I just put a little bit of sand over top of the seed, and it's just not working this year. It's just not working this year. No, I don't let the burlap stay in the grade with time. And the reason for that is oh, the reason for that is that in the mid-lighter method that I use, we realize that things on the soil tend to breed pests, diseases, fungus, and especially here in Ohio, where you have so much humidity in the summer, it really can do that. I mean, I know like Oh How Happy Gardener Charlie, he uses leaf mulch a lot, but he also has a lot of problems with Colorado potato beetles and squash, cucumber beetles and stuff like that. And it's because the bugs can really get down in there and live and overwinter. And you really want to kind of keep, in the mid-layer method, we believe in keeping the soil as sterile as possible. We don't care about, oh, drop the phone. We don't care about the soil for nutrition, because we add weekly exactly what the plants need for nutrition. So, this phone, it's just wanting to fall today. Let me move this battery around, set it up here. So, um, yeah, it's a bit cooler here in East Tennessee as well. However, most of my crops that I planted so far are still doing pretty good, but we did lose a few, and that's good. Here we just had a lot of rain, and with the cold, so um, it's just been a bad year to get plants started. It really has been. And it's just as soon as it's nice for a few days and you think we're out of it, it just comes back. It's just crazy. Yeah. So as far as like putting mulch or a cover on the garden, we typically don't do that in mid-lighter, but there are exceptions, right? So plants only are as successful as their most limiting factor. So whether that's light, airflow, uh, water, uh, pests and disease, nutrition, right? So all those things come into effect, and a plant's only going to produce as much as its most limiting factor. If it doesn't have enough water, then it's not going to produce as much. So if you live in a very dry climate, you're going to be less susceptible to molds and fungus and fusarium wilt and a lot of those diseases that live under that mulch. So adding a little mulch, I'm not necessarily against it. Even as a mid-lighter gardener, they tell you not to do it. I'm not necessarily against it because water is going to be a very limiting factor in Arizona, right? But in Ohio, in humid climates, I don't normally use it. So let me see. Somebody else left a comment. We had 1 week of warm weather and my plants took off. Yeah, and so we had like a week of warm weather just a little while ago, and I thought things were going to take off, and it just started raining and raining and rain. I mean, it's done nothing for the last 2 days but rain. And it's gone from like a light sprinkle to downpour, to light sprinkle to downpour, to light sprinkle to downpour. And it's just flooding things out. Um, but we'll see what recovers, and we'll see what we can replant and redo. Um, but yeah, so we live with the 7 laws of plant growth, and I don't remember what all of them are in the Miller method, but basically plants need to have enough light. Plants need to be spaced far enough apart to have sufficient airflow, because plants get 3 of their nutrients from the air, um, and they make carbohydrates from combining carbon, hydrogen, and oxygen. That's what makes the cellulose that makes them grow and makes them produce fruit. They make that through photosynthesis. That's why a lot of times you'll see people doing potato towers, right? And I mean, there's this video on YouTube. It's funny. Like, this guy's like, "Oh, I got my potato tower," and he's been burying dirt on it. Like, he lets the vine grow up this far, and he covers it with dirt, and he lets it grow up this far, and he covers it with dirt. And he's like, "Now we're gonna dig through here and see how many potatoes we have." And he's digging through, and he's not finding any potatoes. And then all of a sudden, the camera shuts off, and it comes back on, and he's like, "Look at all these potatoes!" And they're like store-bought potatoes with no dirt on them, right? Like, he went to the store, got a bag of potatoes, and threw them down there. Because potatoes are made out of carbohydrates, right? And carbohydrates are formed by photosynthesis. So you can't have a big potato below the ground unless you have lots of foliage above the ground. When you have a really big, healthy plant growing up above the ground to collect the sunlight and to photosynthesize and combine the carbon, the hydrogen, and the oxygen into a carbohydrate, you have a big potato. So, I don't even hill my potatoes, right? Most potatoes, like 99% of potato varieties, are a determinate variety, which means they grow down and they set their potatoes, and that's all the potatoes they set. They don't grow potatoes up the vine. There are a couple of varieties that do that. Um, but normally I just plant them a couple inches below the soil and let them grow. And they grow in rock hard clay. They're harder to dig out, and you gotta get the pitchfork out and you stab one once in a while, and it just means you eat that one first. But they always grow really well. Last year, I had some Colorado potato beetle. I had to cover them up with diatomaceous earth for weeks to get rid of the potato beetles, and that just really killed the photosynthesis. So I had a lot of little small potatoes. But you got to do what you do, because the Colorado potato beetles will just destroy a potato crop. I mean, they'll move in and just take over. One of the things I'm doing this year to help control some of the insects is a giant bug zapper that goes outside the shed at night, just to help zap some of those bugs. Hey, Power Stroke Jude, how's it going? I think I saw you got banned over at the Den of Tools channel, didn't you? I think you said something smart, and he was like, "Well, let me help you with that." Yeah, I am feeling better, but this blood pressure medicine they got me on is just ridiculous. There's some stuff that started with an eye that's supposed to be a vasodilator, kind of like the nitroglycerin. I took that, and it just made my heart like boom, boom, boom. I mean, it felt like my heart was gonna explode for 12 freaking hours. I couldn't sleep at all that night because I could feel my heart beating in my jugular veins, my eyes. I could see it in my vision pulsating. I'm like, what the heck is this crap they got me on? So I didn't take that anymore. But they still got me on 5 other blood pressure medicines, which they just make me tired. They make me weak. They make my muscles get tired really fast. Just like I feel like they're not getting enough oxygen. I don't know. But I'm still seeing the blood pressure specialist doctor, and they're still wanting more money. I don't know why I paid my copay, but they sent me a bill. They want some more money. Like, these medical bills are getting crazy, but I'm trying not to have to dip into any of my mutual funds, but I might have to dip into some of my mutual funds to pay some of that hospital bill. So, but I guess that's what I have it there for. But market's actually doing pretty good right now. I'd rather dip into the money. Yeah, I'm on 40 lisinopril. I'm on hydrochlorothiazide for a water pill. I'm on Oh, Metoprolol, 100 milligrams of that. I'm on another red pill. I forget the name of it. And some other medicine. I forget the name of it. Those are the two new ones. Then they tried to add this other one that was the vasodilator, and that stuff about killed me. Um, and my blood pressure was as high as it ever is. So, when I first, uh, you know, I started having problems. When I first started keto, my blood pressure came way down. But then it started creeping back up and up and up and up. Nobody knows why. I've had the kidney scans and all this stuff and CAT scans and things that, so it's idiopathic. They don't know why it's that high. But so it got up to one point where it was like 270 over something, then came down a little bit to 250 over something, and now with all the medicines that have me on, it's running into 160s. I'm good with that. I'm happy with 160s. My blood pressure doctor thinks we should get it to the 120s. I'm like, I'm just not willing to sit at home with no energy feeling like my heart's going to explode so that I can have a blood pressure in the 120s. At some point, you have to realize that those numbers aren't necessarily everything and they're not equal for every person. And I know that my heart's I had a full echocardiogram and a stress test, and I know that my heart's in good shape. Um, but the I'm not worried about my heart exploding. I don't have any blockages. I don't, it's just that the muscle's getting a little bit thicker on the left side from years of high blood pressure, I guess. Yeah, yeah, and you know, my blood sugars have been decent, but my blood pressure has just gotten out of control. And I've done everything I've always had high blood pressure, and I've done everything. I lost a chunk of weight. I quit the smoking. I, uh, stopped eating salt until I had low sodium and like was falling over because my knees wouldn't stay locked. I would fall down when I was walking, and they discovered I had low sodium. Still had high blood pressure. Always had high blood pressure. It never makes a difference. And it's like my body will do good on a certain medication for a little while, but then it like adapts to it, and my body wants to raise it for some reason. I don't know why, but yeah, 30 days for 180. Yeah, I mean, a doctor would tell you that's way too high, but that's fine. I think Um, back in my grandpa's day, they used to use the little pea strips to tell your blood sugar, and they couldn't even tell. It wouldn't even change to a high reading until it was in the 200s. So, that's all they did was keep their blood sugar under the 200s. um, well, no, they actually had sugar strips that you peed on that would tell you when you were starting to spill sugar out into your urine. So, once your sugar gets above like 220 or so, your kidneys actually kick in and start to try to filter out that sugar. And so they would detect that sugar. Ketones happen from ketosis when your sugar's low and your body's converting fat through gluconeogenesis into sugar, right? or into ketones that your body burns directly. But so they definitely have ketone strips, but I believe that the sugar strips that you peed on were to detect sugar that you're spilling out in your urine. That's what they call polydipsia. When you become polypsic, you start peeing a lot and you start wanting to drink a lot. And your blood sugar gets real high, and that's because your kidneys are trying to get that sugar out of your body before it kills you. Yeah, yeah. Unfortunately, I just can't because I won't have a job. I won't have a job if I'm on CBD oil, so um, it's not an option for me. Yeah, that's a heck of an improvement. That's a heck of an improvement. So I had one high one last year that was 9.1. I was like, oh my gosh! But my last one came back at 6.8, and it's gonna go down further than that, hopefully. But oh, there's no crime to it, but they can still fire you for it. Yeah, so you can get prescription marijuana here in Ohio now too. However, if you take it and they do a and they do a urine test and find out that you're on it, they'll still fire you for it. And just because you have a medical license doesn't mean they can't fire you for taking it. At least in my state. I have no idea what this spring is for on this weed eater. I have to figure out where that goes. I got my weed eater all tore apart here. Uh, Putting a new starter thing in it, and I'm waiting on the part to come. That's my. So the weed eater, my lawnmower, my push mower, and my riding mower are my only three gasoline powered tools anymore. I do have an electric weed eater, but sometimes I need one that's more powerful to get through the tall stuff. So the pull cord stopped locking in, and it's because the little gears are stripped out in it. So I had to take it apart, figure out how to take this clutch thing off the front, and get in there to it. But this is actually like a 4-cycle weed eater. It's pretty cool. It's got a little. It's got a little. Let me show you. It's even got a little valve cover here with 2 rocker arms, 2 little push rods coming up. You actually put the oil in the back of it right here, but you don't mix it in the gas on this one. So it's a pretty nice weed eater. It's pretty powerful too. I like it. It starts really well when the pull cord works. And I just got done fixing the trimmer head because it had 2 bad springs in it where it was advancing the line too much. Like it would just advance the line sometimes when you didn't even bump it. And so I fixed that. And then this. It's always something with the gasoline powered tools, I'll tell you. Always something with them. Let me see the comments here. Yeah, no new comments. Yeah, and I don't know. I mean, they say some of that CBD oil doesn't actually make you test positive and this and that. I don't know. I have to look into it. But it's crazy. Um, I don't really like the feeling of being high. Um, they had me on the. Hey, Greg, how's it going? But they had me on the morphine and the Dilaudid in the hospital, and it got rid of the pain. But man, it's too strong. It just, woo, wow. I just don't like feeling like out of control like that, or just I know some people. I think some people maybe have other types of pain and that they're trying to cover up, but I really don't, and it almost like gives me kind of a panicky feeling when I'm feeling like I'm not in control. So I don't really like that stuff. you know, um, you know, I will do some Vicodin or something like that if I hurt myself, but that's about it. Yeah, DNA policies on most construction sites, and so, I all right. Yeah, I'm feeling okay, but my blood pressure is still a little out of control, and the blood pressure medicine they have me on doesn't make me feel so great, Greg. Um, so yeah, I work in a steel processing center, and so they're all day long. I have to go out in the warehouse and work on computers, even though I'm in IT. I'm still out in the warehouse with my hard hat and my steel toe boots and my safety glasses a lot. And they're moving 30 tons of steel overhead balanced on a single. It's a crane that has a single thing in the middle, and they have us 30 tons worth of I-beams balanced on it, taking it down the aisle. You got to keep your head on a swivel. You got to keep an eye out. You got to make sure the crane operator knows you're there, you know, because it only takes one mechanical failure of one chain, and that load's coming down. So, they don't. they don't play. Like when I was on Percocet, when I got out of the hospital, I called and said, like, I'm on Percocet. Can I come in and just work in the office? They said, no, you can't come in. You know? Which is understandable. Um, well, thanks, Power Stroke dude. I'm glad you love my content. I just try to keep it real here. I'm just a normal dude doing normal stuff. I think. Well, I don't know. A lot of normal dudes don't have tools. I mean, like, I guess the dudes I think are normal have tools, but a lot of guys just these days they don't know how to turn a screwdriver. They work someplace and get some big college degree and drive a BMW, you know. But that's okay, you know. It takes all kinds, I guess. But yeah, I'm just a dude. Just a dude trying to get through life and pay his medical bills and still be able to retire one day, I'll tell you. Yeah. And trying to get through this uh, crazy political stuff and still be allowed to own guns at the end of it. That's the other thing. Like, the ATF is like wanting to redefine the definition of a firearm, which is really something that's written into the law that only Congress can do. And they just want to redefine it. And not only, you see, it's a waste of their time because a court's going to look at that and say, oh, I'm sorry that you redefined what you thought was a firearm, but the law says this is a firearm. And that actually means that an AR 15 receiver is not considered a receiver under the current law, no matter what you think, right? And so what the ATF typically does is they go and they arrest somebody, they put them in jail for a year, they get them to sign away their right to a speedy trial, right? And then after they've kept them in jail for a year or two, if they actually do get a decent legal defense and they're going to make that defense that, you know, what they did wasn't actually illegal under the law, then they're like, oh, yeah, we'll just let it go. We're just going to drop the case. Or you know, they plead down some little charge, right? And that's not how it's supposed to work. You know, the ATF isn't supposed to be making laws. Congress is supposed to make laws. The judges are supposed to determine if those laws are constitutional or not. And the ATF's job, the Department of Justice's job, is to go out and arrest people for crimes that cross state lines and bring them to justice based on what the actual law is, not what their interpretation of it is, you know. Well, I'm glad I've helped a lot of people with my videos. I try. I was coming to the zone. Don't own a screwdriver. Yeah. Yeah. That's why I don't tell the guys at AutoZone that I'm a mechanic. Um, I was in the hospital for 2 months last year. Thank God for health insurance. Still paid $6,000 out of pocket. It could have been a lot worse. Yeah. I'm up to about $4,700 out of pocket so far. EPA is supposed to set the gas mileage standards for the manufacturers, yet they did it anyway. Yeah, yeah. So a lot of these agencies have just really. I'll tell Alabama. Okay. But a lot of these agencies have really just gotten out of hand, and they think they have all this power that they don't have. The EPA is definitely one of those. The ATF can be one of those. I found that the local guys, the local ATF agents that come around to the stores and do the FFLs, and those guys are great. They're good people. But there's people higher up in those organizations that aren't good people. And with the COVID, you know, we had so many places just being like, well, you have to close down. And it's like, they don't have any authority to tell us to close down, you know? They're just taking, yeah, they're overstepping. That's what they're doing. And, you know, The problem with that is eventually there's going to need to be an appeal to heaven if the government gets out of control, and I don't want things to get there, right? So that's, the appeal to heaven is the original. So back during British rule, there was uh, a thing with pine trees. So the British wanted to save all the big pine trees for themselves to make masts for their ships. And we, of course, wanted those pine trees. And that's where you see the pine tree flag that says appeal to heaven. That's kind of its basis. And the appeal to heaven is that we're making an appeal to heaven that we don't have to go to war to establish our rights, you know? And so uh, basically, I mean, that's a big part of kind of like a few years before the revolution happened, or a decade or so there. I don't know the exact dates or the exact names of the people off the top of my head, but basically they went into this town where this guy decided to cut down a bunch of England's pine trees, and they sent some redcoats there, and they strung the redcoats up and whipped them and beat them and sent them on their way. And the British didn't like that too much. But you know, there is a point in which, that's where the pine tree came about. But then the appeal to heaven part is that we're appealing to God to say, please help us so that we do not have to go to war with these people. you know Appealing to God for his intervention. you know but that flag actually, predates the Gadsden flag. um and I actually have an appeal to heaven flag flying in my front yard right now. As a matter of fact, I changed it out the other day. But hopefully it doesn't come to that. Yeah. Let's see. Yeah, so the Constitution guarantees us our rights, but our rights are natural rights that we just have because we're alive, right? You have natural rights as humans, and the Constitution kind of defines what a lot of those rights are. Um, you can say the Constitution's a contract that we have with the government, right? And so we basically said, we're willing to follow the laws as long as you're willing not to overstep these laws. Of course, the problem is I never signed any contract. Right? I was just born into this contract. So I really like to think the Constitution. A lot of people use the term God-given rights. Because of the section in the Declaration of Independence that says the rights are given to us or endowed to us by our Creator. Um, but there's nowhere in the actual Bill of Rights or the Constitution that it says our rights are God given. And I don't know that really God gives us those rights. As far as in my dealing with God, I'm a miserable, wretched sinner, and I have no rights, right? So, but I think those rights, no matter how you look at it, they're guaranteed to us by the Constitution of the United States, and we have to fight for them. So, I left the message on the ATF comments, like, hey, if you guys want to redefine the definition of a receiver so that it includes AR-15s for sure, that's fine. You need to go to Congress, have a congressman or a senator introduce a bill to redefine it, and then they need to have the fight about it. And everybody needs to be able to call their congressmen and their senators and say what they think about it. The discussion needs to be had. And I know that working with Congress is like herding squirrels, but it's a necessary part of us maintaining our freedom and our protections against tyranny, that these things go through Congress and there's a process. And you guys are trying to step in and bypass that process when you know darn good and well if you don't actually get the law changed, a judge is going to find that your opinion means nothing, but yet you're going to use it to inconvenience thousands or maybe even millions of good, decent, law-abiding citizens, and be able to lock them up and not give them a speedy trial and basically ruin their life for a couple of years. You'll be able to seize their account, take control of their money over an interpretation of the law that you had that's not valid because you never got the law changed by Congress, who makes the laws. That was basically my point to them. And I'm sure that someone at the ATF will read that comment and it will mean absolutely nothing to them. But, you know, I still left my comment, left my name and my email address and all my good information there.